to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker joining me as we are headed to the playoffs very soon. Like, it feels like we're on the cusp, and these are the last 15 to 12-ish games. Well, has anybody had 70 games played yet? I don't think so, but we're getting there. Once you see that 7, that's when you start to go, oh yeah, LA, Anaheim, Vegas. They're all at 70 games played. I knew I had seen it somewhere. Justin, we are close. We are like now less than a month away from the playoffs.
Dude, you know you're close when you start seeing people's pie charts and graphs when it's like, oh, this is what, the team's chances of making the playoffs, or just how many games till they're eliminated. And I love when I see that stuff. It's kind of cheesy, but, to me, it's like, springtime, right? It's like when it rolls around, it's here, and, well, at least you hope it's here anyways. Not here in Michigan, but, when you see those charts pop up, the playoffs are right around the corner.
Yeah, in Michigan, all the spring means is that, like, the moon is changed or something. Right. It's still cold. And, I mean, in a lot of the, I'll say, traditional hockey world, it's still a tidbit nipply out right now. Hopefully that changes by the time the playoffs actually get here. Hopefully with playoffs we're ushered in with beautiful weather. But with the playoffs so close, and the Eastern Conference, it's decided. The New York Islanders are not going to make the playoffs. They're 13 points back of the Washington Capitals. It would take an absolute freaking miracle. Not only do the Islanders need to win, out of their 15 games left, they probably could lose 2, maybe 3 games. And then Washington has 14 games left, and that would mean all that they need to do. If the Islanders won all 15 games, that would put them at 101 points. And that would mean that the Capitals needed to get 17 more out of a possible 28. So they barely even have to go 500 for the Islanders to miss the playoffs despite winning all the rest of their games. So they're out. So the East is decided. So I think maybe a little less crucial in terms of this conversation, but there are teams in the West that are certainly still in it. I would say there's 2 teams that are fighting for 4 playoff spots. How about that? In the West. And we're kind of coming down to the wire here, and so we wanted to talk about the players that we thought, okay, playoffs are coming. Some teams are fighting for the playoffs. Who are the players that, for their respective teams, are most important for them to get going? And if they don't, their teams may be in trouble. Either come playoff time, or maybe they'll miss the playoffs if that player doesn't get going, or they're not going to do as well in the playoffs as they could. Justin, how did you determine the order of your list? What factors did you weigh the heaviest?
Yeah, so obviously I looked at all the playoff teams and those 4 you mentioned that are fighting for the 2 remaining spots, and then really I just looked at, okay, if they got into the playoffs, or if they're trying to make a push for maybe, say they're trying to get out of a wild card spot, right? What players really are going to factor in my opinion, to the success of the team? Obviously, we know a lot of, players. There's the superstars, right? You're usually your top line, top 6 forward guys, your top pairing defensemen. But beyond that, to me, I tried to look at those guys that would impact the secondary success of the teams the most. And then I also factored in, obviously, what position they played and how many minutes they usually see, and then tried to make a determination on how important I thought they would be to the team's overall success come playoff time.
Yeah, I'd say, that's same exact mindset I had coming in. I only have 2 goalies out of my 10. That's because, you could make a list of 10 goalies, and say, well, if this guy doesn't play well, then his team's screwed, which is absolutely true. But I think that for the most part, we know the New York Rangers, Shesterkin, he's so important to their success, but we're not looking at him as, boy, you better pick up your game. He's the reason they're where they are. I mean, the Rangers have been on a little roll here too. So I mean, that's not the kind of player that's popping on my list. It's the guy who maybe hasn't been playing well, and he's going to need to play well for his team to either make the playoffs or have success in it. Okay, well, let's just let's get rolling down the list here then. Who do you have
Beautiful.
at number 10?
Yeah, number 10 for me. You know what? It's funny. I just mentioned that I typically don't like to look at those. Well, I do like to look at those top 6 guys, but they don't factor in as much to this type of list. But however, the first guy on my list at number 10, I couldn't help but put in. He plays top line minutes for the St. Louis Blues, and that's Ryan O'Reilly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people might be sitting here wondering, like, dude, this guy's been playing great. He's a superstar. I mean, he's one of the reasons they won a cup a few years back. And so I kind of looked at that and I said, okay, listen, St. Louis has got very, very good balance as far as their forward group is concerned. Justin Falk, Torrey Krug are playing great on the back end. And I could pick apart the goaltending all day, and they may or may not pop up later on my list. However, when I look at Ryan O'Reilly, and I go back to the year when they won the cup here, and he was basically putting up 77 points in 82 games, which is, obviously a fantastic pace. However, when you look at the playoffs, I mean, he was a beast come playoff time. I mean, he just basically 23 points in 26 games, not to mention just everything else he does from faceoffs to, his fantastic defensive play. But to me, I think if this St. Louis team wants to push for, maybe home ice advantage in the first round, maybe get that number 2 spot, avoid falling into a wild card position here with Nashville and Vegas and Dallas pushing. To me, he is a guy that's got to step up the production a bit more. I need more out of Ryan O'Reilly from an offensive standpoint that I'm just not getting from years past. And I think maybe it partially has to do with the fact that, the rest of his team is playing so well. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, these guys have finally stepped up.
He's no longer the top dog on that team in terms of point production.
Absolutely. But for me, though, if I think St. Louis is going to make a deep run and make a good push for a Stanley Cup here, he's got to be the guy, right? Those other young guns, they don't really have the experience, the veteran leadership that he does. And if, St. Louis is going to have success, minus the goaltending issues back there, I think for him, he's got to step it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think his 15 goals that's a little disappointing. I mean, granted, he in 1920 he put up. It makes it sound like I'm saying the year 1920. He's ancient. He's been playing for over 100 years.
Clearly.
In the 2019-20 season, he only scored 12 goals in 71 games. Had 61 points. A guy's an assist machine, but we are used to seeing him score generally at least 20 goals, which he's done in most of his seasons since 13-14. Only 2 seasons he's not scored 20 goals, and that 19-20 season obviously cut a little short. He played more games than most. St. Louis actually played 71 games that year. I feel like that's a lot more than some guys. Some guys were down in the 60s, and but to only score 12 goals that year, that's a down year. So 15 and 63. I'm assuming that by the time the season's over and they play, St. Louis has another 15 games, I'm assuming that he's scoring 5 goals. That's like relatively the pace that he's on. So he's at a 20 goal season. But yeah, he's not had the offensive prowess. Like last year, he was a point per game, and he's well under that at this point. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Ryan O'Reilly, I mean, they're going to make the playoffs, but how deep are they going to go? And a guy like that, maybe he's just going, we're in the playoffs. I can't play the way I want to play in the playoffs all year long, you know?
Sure.
So, yeah, that's a good one. I don't have Ryan O'Reilly on my list, but I like it. My number 10 is I have a couple, 3 times in my list, a double appears, like 2 players on one line on one team or something like that, where both players' successes are going to play a huge factor. For the Dallas Stars, I like their odds because of how many games in hand they have. They've been playing fine down the stretch. 79 points, or 1 point back of Vegas with 4 games in hand. But regardless, the 2 guys making the most money, I know that we're not in this place where we need them to be the top guys in Dallas. They aren't anymore, and Dallas's success is not being driven by them. And I think that that's fine, you know, relying more on a Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson. Those guys have, I mean, not come out of nowhere, but they are the top guys in Dallas. But I think in order for Dallas to make a legitimate run, Tyler Sagan and Jamie Benn need to be better than like what I equate to. You guys are putting up like really good third line numbers. Like probably by the end of the season, they both have maybe like 45, maybe 50 points. So they're like a decent second line, but they just, I want to see, I think that most really good teams basically have 2 good first lines, right? Like their top 2 lines are relatively interchangeable in terms of their production. And Dallas's production drops way off once you get down to Ben and Sagan. And so I think even if they've kind of hit their wall and neither one of them is going to be what they have been in the past, I think they've got to figure it out for one more playoff run for this club. So I've got them at number 10.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, I've got Tyler Sagan on my list. He's a little further up at number 8, but I absolutely agree with you. I think Tyler Sagan is a guy, especially at that cap hit.
He's only 30 years old. He's not, like,
right.
This isn't the season where it's supposed to all fall apart.
Yeah, and you look at a guy on that top line with Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson, and you look at old man Jopa, you're like, what the frick has he been doing? Like, man's only been just driving a point per game and just really leading the production from this Dallas Stars team. And so, I'm sure a guy like Tyler Sagan, again, who's only 30 years old, has to look at that and say, okay, cool. Well, if he can do it, I can surely do it. And who knows, maybe it's a mental thing, right? Maybe he just literally, started off on a slump and just really couldn't get it going. But this is a guy who typically we're talking about a perennial 30 goal scorer. And, last year, obviously he dealt with injury. The year before that, COVID, but he still had decent production, albeit not scoring as many goals. But still, prior to that, I mean, he was lighting the lamp. So he's not that far removed. And, yes, he'll have a 20-goal season, but, maybe this could be a slump year. Maybe just because of the emergence of Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz, his minutes have kind of suffered because of it. But, all in all, I mean, you look at the amount of shots he's put in. I mean, look, when he was, putting up 30 goals, a few years back, he had well over 300 shots, and he's barely halfway there to what he's actually at the exact halfway point as far as shots when he put up 33 goals in 18-19. So, again, you can see where it's coming from. He's just not shooting enough, and I want to see more from Jamie Benn or from Tyler Sagan.
Both.
Yeah, both. Right.
And Jamie Benn, I mean, there's another guy who he should be able to shine during playoff time. I get maybe you can't play the way that you would like to play all year round, but this is playoff mode. It's time to go. Like, if Dallas misses the playoffs, that's a huge failure for what they've decided to invest into this season and not trading John Klingberg alone. I think that it's crucial both those guys get going. They have to make the playoffs, and unfortunately, it's likely going to come at Vegas's expense. Which I know, yeah. I know. Somewhere inside of me, I really like it because and I think a lot of people are rooting against Vegas because of just like the intentional, yeah, it's just a very intentional trying to skirt the rules a little bit, trying to bend the rules of the salary cap. Not like Tampa did it, but it didn't feel like they were doing it. Because you're like, oh man, right. Kucherov's out for the year. Oh man, well they have to get someone else in there. So they did, and it didn't seem that bad. And then it was just kind of like, well, wow, you guys are so far over the cap now. Oh, that's kind of cheap, but I get it. Whereas Vegas is like, oh, we'll just put this guy on LTI. Hey, you got a bad back. So why not just not play the rest of the season? We'll go get someone else who's really expensive. Like Tampa just, patched their lineup together. And yeah, when he came back, they were above the cap. But Vegas was like, yeah, let's go get a superstar instead. So, I mean, I admire their guts. Like, just, okay, this is the rules. And they're right. That's the rules. So they're just doing what they're allowed to do. The same way that, hey, yes, there's a cap, but you know what? Do you think the Arizona Coyotes spend as much as the Montreal Canadiens on scouting and on analytics? Hell no. So, I mean, that's not fair. You could say, well, that some teams have a financial monstrous advantage to be able to, do the background stuff more efficiently or with more eyes and ears, but that's the reality. So there are just times when it's not always going to be perfectly fair. Okay, let's go to number 9. Who do you got at number 9?
I've got Tyson Berry from the Edmonton Oilers.
You know what? I thought about putting him on my list, and I didn't. I don't even have an Oiler on my list. Oh, no, I do.
Oh,
I lied. I
was going to say, for shame.
I thought you said horse shit.
I might as
horse
well.
Shit. Oh, good. God, sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know that.
Your list is horse shit. Just throw it out now. Oh, man. Okay, so Tyson Berry, I mean, listen. This is a guy who was brought into Edmonton after, great seasons in Colorado and Toronto. Came out of the gate, putting up 48 points in 56 games, and you think, okay, cool. They signed him to a 1-year on the cheap kind of deal because, again, this was like a, make it or break it kind of contract for him. And he had great success at Edmonton. It looked like he was just going to be a really, really good fit. So, of course, they give him an extension, 3 years, $4.5 million, which is, good money for a second-line guy. But he is the top dog in Edmonton as far as offense is concerned. He's got to be the guy that puts up that offensive production from the back end. I mean, he gets to play top-line minutes. He plays on the first power play unit, which, at the beginning of the year seemed like it was clicking at 50% for months. I mean, we had Wayne Gretzky on TNT saying it's the best power play that's ever been out there. And, that blew up really fast. But, regardless, I mean, this guy is basically given the keys to the offensive kingdom on the back end. And of his 32 points, 17 have come on the power play. So really only 15 5-on-5 points for this guy. Not good enough for me. I mean, I need more out of Tyson Berry, especially when you look at a team that basically goes through Seidl and McDavid, and everybody else is kind of doing okay. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has been playing great. I'm not going to give him any fault, but everybody else has been suspect. And, again, if this team wants to have any sort of success, especially with that goaltending back there, and they may pop up later on my list as well, this back end's got to produce a little bit more, or else they're going to sink really, really fast with no depth scoring.
Yeah, I mean, he's at 50% production less than last year. Well, I guess he had 50% more production last year
there you go.
This time. So 48 points to his 32 right now. Just not quite putting up the numbers. I don't know. At the end of the season, he'll have around 40, 45 points, and that might. It's not good enough for what they were expecting because he's putting up 48 in 56. But the year before he's putting up 39 and 70. But he really struggled early on with Mike Babcock. So that you could kind of write off. The 2 years before that, he's putting up almost 60 points in fewer than 82 games. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're hoping that he can figure this out. I think that's a great eye. Tyson Berry, if you're listening, it's time to get going, all right?
Yeah, and we know this is a guy that isn't going to be great defensively, right? That's not his MO. That's not why he was brought in there. They've got other guys that they're hoping can fill in on the defensive back end to cover up for his offensive abilities, right? I mean, that's what he was brought in there to do. He was brought in to be an offensive guy for their back end because, frankly, they don't have a lot at that, on the back end. So Duncan Keith certainly isn't going to lead your top power play unit, and he's not the same guy he was. So Tyson Berry has got to be the guy if this Edmonton team wants to go far in the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And, the other side of it is that his PDO is very high, 103.1. So, I mean, the shooting percentage on ice is 12.1%. Save percentage is 91%, 5-on-5. I mean, he's got some, like, the underlying numbers should be favoring him to be putting up more points than he is. I mean, possession numbers are down from last year, but they're still really good, still in the 56 range. I mean, you kind of look at it and you go, what's going on different than last year? He is taking he's taking more draws in the defensive zone than he has since the 2015-16 season, albeit not by a crazy margin, but that could play a small factor. But, we're seeing it. Guys hit 30 years old, and that's kind of the beginning, not necessarily the beginning of the end, but it is a shift. A lot of guys just can't put up those points. They slow down. You hit that wall, and things just start to slow down. And I think that they have to change their training going into that point. Like sometimes you see that resurgence. They have a down year, and then they're able to kind of tack on a couple more years later on because they figure out what they need to do. Either that or they just fall off the map and they're gone out of the league pretty quick. So we'll see with Tyson Berry. But I think you're right. For a long playoff run, if he's not putting up pretty good numbers, it probably means the Oilers aren't scoring that much. And he needs to get moving. All right, my number 9, I actually have a rookie at my number 9. And I've got Quentin Byfield for the LA Kings. Okay.
I actually put him on my just missed list. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We're on the same page there then. I mean, he misses the beginning of the year because of that injury. He's got 8 points in 30 games now. It's not like he's getting 18, 19 minutes of ice time, but I mean, he's getting his last 5 games. He's averaging about 15 minutes a game almost. So he's out there. He's playing. He only has 1 goal in his last 5 games. I think you want to see him take some strides. And if he can, these last 20 games, I think for a guy who's 19 years old, there isn't necessarily pressure for him to be really good. Like, he doesn't need to be good. It's not his fault if he's not necessarily super ready to go in and be a top line player. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I am suggesting that the LA Kings would love, and I think if they're going to go on a run, then he may be the key to hey, I figured it out right at the perfect time, and now suddenly we have 3 good lines. And Quentin Byfield's driving that other line. So that, I mean, and a 6'5", 220, he sounds like a playoff guy. He sounds like somebody you don't want to go up against in the playoffs. If he's healthy enough and feels good enough to use his body in the playoffs, that'll be, that remains to be seen. But I think he'd be an important guy for the Kings.
Yeah, I don't disagree, right? You look at Tampa Bay, for example, last 2 cup winners, right? They had great success because they had a third line that contributed. And if LA wants to have success, right, that's the reason they brought in Philip Deneau, was so there was no pressure on Quentin Byfield to develop quickly and be that top 6 guy immediately. So now you have an opportunity for Quentin Byfield to really, I mean, look, he doesn't have to rush his development, but still he has to contribute, right? I mean, that's going to be key to LA success. And so you still need to go out there and put up some points. And granted, he's not getting top power play minutes. He's not getting, any kind of special teams looks, but still he's playing on a good LA team that, basically has a good back end. So he doesn't have to worry about playing too good defensively. He can go out there and focus on just developing the offensive side of his game first, and then really work on the defensive game a little bit later.
I mean, and his possession numbers are all in the positive. So he's playing well enough to where when he's on the ice, they've got the puck more often than they don't. And his PDO is actually only a 98.7, which it's because of the on-ice shooting percentage. It's only 7.6%. So that's low. And you're likely maybe you'll get a little more luck come playoff time and down the stretch here. I mean, him personally, he's shooting 16%. I think, 16%. So it's not as if his shooting percentage is low, but only 31 shots in 30 games. I think that's something that you hope as an LA Kings fan. I mean, he's got 3 of the last 5 games he has had no shots on goal. And that's just not going to, that's not going to do much for you. So I think him getting the puck in shooting position is going to be big for LA. Now, is LA requiring him to be good? No, but I do think that if LA is going to, let's say, beat the Edmonton Oilers in the first round, who, even though maybe they haven't had the greatest regular season, I do think that the Oilers are a better team than the Kings. Like, I'll take the Oilers over the Kings in the playoffs because of what the Oilers have to do. They have to win that series. But I think if the Kings can get that third line going, then they are going to be maybe clicking at the right time going into the playoffs. Who's your number 8?
Yeah, number 8, I mentioned him a little earlier, Tyler Sagan. Not going to beat that drum, but yeah, he needs to pick it up.
Okay, my number 8 is not someone that necessarily you're looking to put up huge points, but I think will be a very important part of the Boston Bruins come playoff time. A guy they signed in the offseason and hasn't really had a good regular season at all, only 11 points, only 2 goals in 49 games. And that is Nick Felino.
Ooh.
Yeah, Nick Felino. I mean, I know he wasn't a world beater when he left Columbus, but he signed a good deal, almost $4 million a year. So he's expected to do something for the Bruins. Maybe that's not put up huge points, but also at a -10, like there's some factors. You look at his underlying numbers and you go, all right, we'd really like to see you play better. And I mean, they brought him in because they thought, hey, Felino can be a guy who plays on our third line come playoff time, and he can drive that physical play. He has gotten very unlucky. His PDO is only 95.5. And his possession numbers are good at 55%, but just not really putting up the numbers in terms of offense. But you need him to be, I think, a little better than he has been in terms of point production, but he needs to be your a juggernaut in the playoffs for the Bruins, because no longer having Krejci, I mean, having Hampus Lindholm certainly helps now, but I look at some like a Taylor Hall. He hasn't exactly been had a lot of playoff anything, because he's only made the playoffs 3 times in his whole career. Had 5 points in 11 games last season, and in general, I think he maybe is a more likely candidate to disappear come playoff time because of the way he plays, especially now as he's slowed down. So, I think that Nick Felino is a really important piece that maybe people aren't looking at on the Bruins to see as a difference maker. But come playoff time, that's the exact guy that you want to kind of unfold come playoff time. For Toronto, he was hurt and just never really got it to put it together. But I think that he could be a solid piece for the Bruins come the postseason.
Yeah, I don't think Felino was brought in to be the offensive juggernaut.
Sure, no.
I don't think they definitely didn't expect him to put up 40 or 50 points. However, you'd still like to get 30 points out of this guy. He brings a lot of defensive and two-way intangibles that I think are extremely valuable come playoff time, like you mentioned. But last night I was watching Boston actually, and that Frederick Coyle and now Mark McLaughlin scoring his first goal last night. He looks like he could be a depth guy that could play an important role for this team now after leaving college. So maybe Felino doesn't get to see that many minutes now if he doesn't step it up right down the stretch here. He may be relegated to fourth line minutes. So better step it up, dude.
There you go. All right, number 7. Who do you have?
I've got a guy who's coming off the IR today. I know I mentioned I wouldn't put anybody on IR, on this list. But what I will say is,
that's true. You did say that. You lied.
Yeah,
son of a.
Well, now he's not. So technically, I'm not lying anymore. But what I will say is, this guy is going to be very, very important to the success, especially now that Peter Mrazek is out for the year. Jack Campbell is a guy that needs to find his game, to me, at number 7 here. Has to step it up, because if this Toronto team, obviously they're going to make the playoffs, but if this Toronto team wants to have any long-term success in the playoff and go past the first round for once, they need this guy to step up and not necessarily be the guy he was in November, but he needs to be, that 9-10, 9-15 save percentage type goaltender for this team, so they don't have to sit there and worry, crap, are we going to, if we give up a 2-on-1 going the other way, are we screwed automatically? I mean, percentages do favor 2-on-1s, but still, you need him to stop a few of those, right? And when I look at Jack Campbell prior to him going out on IR, and yes, he also took that week off to reset mentally, but from March 8th, or from January 1st to March 8th, playing 17 games, 9 of those he allowed 4 or 5 or more goals.
Yeah, it was a rough stretch.
Right. And so you need that guy pre-2022 who was playing, again, decently in December, November. You need pretty much close to that if you're going to have some
we
good
were
success.
talking about him for the Vezina Trophy early on.
Absolutely.
That's it. Yeah, I don't necessarily think they need that guy. However, if you can get that guy, I think the Leafs go from being in the pack of, hey, they could win the cup. Sure. I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that the Leafs win the cup, but I think that a lot of things have to go right. But if they were getting Vezina caliber goaltending, suddenly, you look at what it's done for the New York Rangers, and I don't think that in terms of the rest of the construction of the offensive abilities of the Leafs versus the Rangers, I'm putting the Leafs ahead. And if the Leafs were getting Shesterkin style goaltending, they'd probably have 110 points.
They'd probably be at the top of that conference right now.
They would be definitely atop the league if they were getting that kind of goaltending. But they don't need that kind of goaltending. But I think they're going to need better than average goal. You don't win in the playoffs and have below average goaltending. It just doesn't happen. Right,
especially considering the teams they have to go up, right? Florida Panthers, right? There's one team you're going to have to probably go through. They literally, they just had the third star of the month there in Sergei Bobrovsky putting up great numbers. He's looked fantastic all year.
Yep.
Vasilevsky in Tampa, we know what he's capable of. And looks like Swayman and Allmark are looking, they look like they're pretty good.
And you've got Tristan Jarry in Pittsburgh, Shesterkin in New York, and then Freddie Anderson going in Carolina. So they're the only team in the Eastern Conference outside of Toronto who you kind of look at their goaltending and scratch your head is Washington. And I thought about putting Alex Ovechkin on this list just because it was the only way the Capitals are going to win is if Alex Ovechkin plays outside his mind. But then every time I look at his stats, I say he is playing outside his mind already. He's still rolling. You go, is he slowing down at all? No. So the Capitals, there's a reason why they didn't go out and do too much craziness at the deadline. I think they recognize that this iteration of the Capitals, they're going to let them do their best, but they're likely not going to go far in the playoffs, having to play either Florida or Carolina in the first round.
Yep.
Okay, my number 7 is a Pittsburgh Penguin, Kasperi Kapanen. I know that they went out and they bring in Rickard Rakell essentially to like pick up the slack for what they are not getting with Kasperi Kapanen, who at the same he has the same exact stat line as last year. This year, 67 games, 11 goals, 19 assists for 30 points. Last year, in 40 games, had the same 30 points and 11 goals. So he's far off his production this year. The underlying numbers, they're not really bad. In my opinion, he just really hasn't he's kind of gotten unlucky in some ways because in terms of his possession, it's actually quite a bit better than last year, and he's playing more in the defensive zone, 40% instead of 30% for his faceoff. So, some of those numbers, they're just kind of, it's easy to look at the point production, but he's not playing terribly elsewhere. It's not as if everything's fallen off. So, I chalk it up to, this is someone who needs to maybe focus a little more on, all right, like I need to score goals. I need to put up points. And his shooting percentage is down 7% from last year. He was at 16.2 this year. He's at 9. So that is not going to help you either. But I think Kasperi Kapanen is one of those guys again that, and do the Penguins need him to be great? No, they went out and got Rickard Rakell just in case. But if he can figure it out, the Pittsburgh Penguins are incredibly dangerous because that means that your third line is now, if your third line is a really good Kasperi Kapanen down there, especially with injuries, if he can slide up in the lineup, which we know he can play anywhere in that lineup, I think the Penguins have a legitimate chance of not just beating the Rangers, but of getting out of the Metro. But I think that they need guys like Kasperi Kapanen to be at their best.
Yeah, we know what Crosby and Malkin are going to do, right? And
sure, exactly.
So they've got those guys. So you need, if for any reason those guys sort of go on a quote unquote dry spell, you need guys like Kasperi Kapanen to step it up.
That's right. All right, who's you? Well, here I'll tell you my number 6. My number 6 is Alex Lafreniere. Let's go, bro. Let's go.
I love it. I've got him on my list too, but a little further up. So we'll talk later. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Okay. We'll touch on him more when we see how high he gets. Who's your number 5?
My number 6 first.
Right.
Yeah. So my number 6 is I kind of stole what you did, and with the Tyler Sagan, Jamie Benn thing, I've got Brandon Hagel and Nick Paul from the Tampa Bay Lightning. And let me reference that I made this list prior to last night's game with Tampa, where that third line was looking really, really good. So for me, Brandon Hagel, first 6 games, only 1 goal. Nick Paul, first 6 games with the team, only 1 goal. This again is a team, minus last night's game for them. Nick Paul and company, they put up some good numbers on that third line. But if Tampa Bay wants to recreate their success in their playoff run, Brandon Hagel's got to be a guy for them, right? Him and Nick Paul both have to step it up, quote unquote, on both ends of the ice. And Nick Paul is gonna be great defensively. I think there's no doubt in my mind he's gonna be able to put up that good two-way game. But I need both these guys to really step it up offensively. And, again, Nick Paul wasn't brought in necessarily to bring those offensive numbers, but Brandon Hagel definitely was. I mean, in 55 games in Chicago this year, 21 goals, 37 points. I mean, yes, he was shooting at a ridiculously high 22% shooting percentage, but I still think there's, even if you get a fraction of that, you're still going to get some good offensive production, and he's going to get opportunities to play on that second power play unit and get some good ice time with some quality players.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a theme that third line players become important come playoff time. Every team has a really good first line. There isn't a playoff team out there that you go, no good first line. There's no one good on that first line. Not a one. Even the teams you would say offensively they're not quite as good. The New York Rangers. Oh well, they've got one of the highest goal scorers in the league in Chris Kreider. They've got Artemi Panarin. Like, they have a good top line. Mika Zibanejad. The Boston Bruins, they haven't scored a whole lot this year either, and yet their top line, like the guys that they can roll out there are still terrifying.
Right.
So the top end of every team is pretty good. They're really maybe the one team that you could point to and say that they don't have the same flash of a top line maybe is Minnesota. Like, yes, they have Kaprizov, but outside of Kaprizov, I don't know that I would go so far as to say that their top line is scary from just like I'm a pure skill point of view. Zuccarello, does he really scare me? No. Kevin Fiala, I suppose he does, but just not to the same extent as like, hey, I'm rolling out Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, or
right.
Or hey, I'm rolling out Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk. Like, there's just a different level of that. I think especially in the East, though, you've got unbelievable top end talent on all these teams. Okay, let's see. We're on number 5, right?
Number 5. Let's do it.
Number 5. I have someone that was traded at the deadline who I think will be a very important player for one of the top teams in the East come playoff time. And that's Max Domey.
Ooh.
He has actually played sneaky good for them so far. He only has 3 assists in 5 games, I think. 5? Is that how many he's played so far for them?
I think so.
Yeah, 5 games. He's only averaged 11 minutes a game so far with them. So, I think I'm sure Rod Brindamore, we know his style. He's a little more hard-nosed. He's going to make you earn it. So it's not surprising that maybe he's not getting huge minutes right away, because he's looking to figure out, how Max Domey fits into the team, and also he wants Max Domey to be able to play a certain way. This Max Domey is not the 2018-19 Domey that had 72 points. I think we now all understand that was a giant anomaly. He's not a 72-point guy. I think he's probably more like a 50-point guy if things are going well for him and he's not playing for John Tortorella. So, with that said, you look at his underlying number. His possession numbers are higher in these 5 games than they have been anywhere else his whole career. A 66.7 Corsi, which is just lights out. He's actually playing more in the defensive zone than he is in the offensive zone for zone starts for the first time in his whole career. So when you consider those things, you're playing more you're starting more in the defensive zone, but your possession numbers are higher than they ever have been. That's a good place to be. So I think we'll see him. His shooting percentages right now for Carolina is 0. So that'll go up. Only 8 shots on goal through 5 games, which is low for him. Like in Columbus, he was generally putting up 3 shots a game, and here he's putting up about 1.5. So he's down 50% in terms of that production. But Carolina has, they needed something to get them over the hump. And I think that Max Domey is the perfect player. Like, come playoff time, I think he has the potential to be the guy for Carolina that you look at when it's all said and done and you go, that trade put them over the top. It allowed them to be able to protect Sebastian Aho and some of these other, like, be able to roll Domey out with against some different opposition and free up Aho, free up that top line, and I think we'll see that it's going to have positive benefits come playoff time.
Yeah, I really loved this trade when I saw it come through the wire here, and Carolina picking up Max Domey to me was going to be a sneaky good trade in terms of just, what he's going to do long term for this team this year. One, because, he gets to finally go to a good team, right? You look at who he's played with, Montreal teams that haven't really been that great, Arizona teams, again, same, and Columbus has just been a bubble team. I mean, he's played on a lot of bubble teams, but now he gets to play with a championship caliber team for once and isn't expected to be the guy offensively on a team, right? So now he gets to go into a situation where he's well protected, isn't looked at to be, an offensive juggernaut, and especially after that 72-point season, right? I mean, there was just a lot of pressure on him to perform, especially when he showed up in Columbus.
Especially being in Montreal and putting up 72 points.
Right. Yeah, so now he gets to go to a Carolina team where he can literally – he doesn't have to play center either because they've got plenty of depth at the center position. So now he gets more opportunity to find his game. Yes, he gets to play center on that second power play unit right now, but again, you're not out there having to constantly win draws and important draws either in the defensive zone.
Very true. Who do you have at number 4?
Well, my number 5, you keep skipping past him. I don't know why, but
it's because I'm so used to letting you go first.
That's very true. Why don't I just go 5 and 4 really quick?
Perfect.
Get out of the way. So at number 5 for me, I've got Jack Eichel from the Vegas Golden Knights. This is a team that is in serious danger of falling out of a playoff spot here, and mostly because, again, games at hand. But for me, again, the stats have been good for Jack Campbell this year. I mean, I don't knock him there, but 16 and 22 games, I expect a little bit more. And yes, he, hasn't had consistent line mates, but
and hasn't played in over a year and had major back surgery. Right. Yeah,
but to me, I want him to step off more from a two-way game side. Because if this team is going to have any sort of chance at getting the playoffs, they need to split up that top line. They need to add a little depth as far as, the face-off circle is concerned. Because right now they've got Chandler Stevenson, who in my opinion is their best face-off guy. They've got him playing on the wing with Jack Eichel, and he has to, Stevenson has to end up taking most of those draws. And if Eichel can sort of step it up in the face-off circle and be a little bit more accountable defensively, then you have the opportunity to move Chandler Stevenson down to maybe your second or third line, and you don't have to rely on Nicholas Roy to be that guy on that third line, right? You can pair a Chandler Stevenson with Matthias Janmark and get a little bit of depth, especially when you're on a team that is so ravaged with injuries right now that really they need all three lines stepping up in order to continue this win streak and hopefully secure a playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand feeling the need to put Jack Eichel into the offensive zone because you want him to score. But his face-off percentage is 52.9%. He's actually doing better in the face-off circle than he ever has in his entire career. Maybe that's all he could do with his back is just like practice draws. I don't know.
Yeah, but right now he's only winning 3 or 4 face-offs a game, and that's because he's not taking that many draws, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, he's taken 100. This year he's taken 225 draws in 22 games. I guess that's not. Yeah, they're putting him on his strong side to take those draws. But to me, I mean, he's starting 70% of his draws in the offensive zone.
Right.
I now some of that I think is, hey, Vegas. Vegas has a pretty good team, so yeah, maybe they're not always having tons of defensive zone draws, but I would think that he should shoulder some more of that defensive zone load because he's talented. He can get the puck out of their zone, And, I have him at number 3, but I have him grouped with Robin Lehner.
Okay.
So, reason being, I mean, this team's going nowhere without Robin Lehner.
Well, that's assuming Lehner comes back before the end of the season, right? Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is that Robin Lehner, if he can't come back, the Vegas Golden Knights, I think, are toast.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't care if they make the playoffs. That's fine. Is your top goalie going to be Logan Thompson going into the playoffs? I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's this season is shot unless Lehner can come back. If Lehner can come back, then we can talk. But it doesn't seem likely. I just put him in there as like more or less like, bro, go like knock your PT out hard or something. I don't know. But yeah, Jack Eichel, he does need to be better if they're going to make the playoffs. Now, I don't blame him. I don't think that. I didn't necessarily expect him to come in and be a 1.2 points per game player because because of what he just went through. So I think that the good thing is whatever happens here, he'll come back next season and he'll be ready to roll, and that's the important thing.
No, I agree, and a healthy Vegas team too, right? If he gets everybody back, Mark Stone on his wing, right, then you get an opportunity to really shine. And they can be
you
really
just got to figure out
year.
what 4 players you're going to get rid of.
Oh, perfect.
Who's your number 4?
Yeah, number 4. I've got my my second goaltender and second player from the St. Louis Blues, and that is Jordan Bingington. I know we talked about Jack Campbell needing to step up and be the man, but to me, I think St. Louis is even more desperate because, again, they have to go through a lot of really good defensive teams. Toronto has the luxury of being to outscore anybody if they need to, right? Whereas St. Louis, I don't necessarily look at them and say this is a team that I know can go out there and put up 6-7 goals a game.
No,
even though, yes, they are scoring a ton of goals, but again, they're going to need good goaltending when they have to go through Minnesota, when you've got to eventually go through Colorado, right? These really good high-scoring teams, and again, it's funny to group Minnesota in there because you wouldn't expect their name to be thrown in with one of the better top offensive teams in the West, but it turns out they are one of those better offensive teams.
So much depth.
Right. And, I mean, look, through 66 games, they've got more goals than Edmonton right now, so what does that say? Especially Edmonton's got a 50-goal scorer here, but, again, St. Louis, again, they've got good depth offensively, and, while they're not going to beat you 6-5 every single game, they still need Jordan Bingington to step up and be the guy he was when they won the Stanley Cup. I mean, because without good goaltending back there, Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, like I mentioned earlier, these guys are having good seasons, but they're going to be gripping the stick a little bit tighter, right? They're going to, take a few steps back and not necessarily want to push in the offensive zone as much as maybe they would feel comfortable doing and maybe what this team needs them to do. So when your defense can't activate because you're so worried about the goaltending back there, that's going to be a problem for St. Louis and a team that has got to go through some really tough defensive teams.
I'm over Jordan Binnington. He's not my starter anymore. It's Ville Husso.
I mean, you would think so, right? But if you're St. Louis, you want Jordan Binnington to step up and be that guy.
Yes, you do. But this is all about Ville Husso right now. And you know what? I think of the Florida Panthers. Hey, you've got your big money goaltender back there that you're going to need for the future because he's signed for so long, and that's fine. You let him figure it out. You're not going to try to trade him. You know that every goaltender goes through these things, and that's okay. You tell him it's okay. You don't things aren't going well right now for you. We're going to figure it out in the offseason. We have to go with Ville Husso right now. And to me, I think that's what the Blues need to do. Just like the Florida Panthers did, just like the Vancouver Canucks, they said, well, we need Corey Schneider to play because he's playing better than Roberto Luongo. And then Roberto Luongo was their starter the next year and into the playoffs the next year. Like this can go well. It just sometimes it happens. And I think you can sell it to your team hey, Husso's hot. Let's ride it. And let's see if they can bring us to win us some rounds. and see where it takes us. And he's the guy they need to go. I mean, Jordan Binnington's been a disaster. You look at his last 10 games, 6 of them, he's given up at least 4 goals. He's given up 5, 6, and 7, and then 4 goals in the other 3. I mean, he has not played well. And he has not played well against offensive teams either. Like, it's not like, all right, hey, come play out, kind of shooting up against a playoff team, he's playing pretty decent. No, even his last 10 games, we'll say his last 8 games, the only playoff team he's actually gone against is Edmonton, and he lost in overtime. But he only played 13 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
Let up 4 goals on 13 shots.
Not too good.
Yeah, so I mean, he's going up against Philly, Winnipeg, Ottawa, New York Islanders, Chicago, New Jersey. Like, they don't trust him. They're playing him against the bad teams, and they're saving Husso for Edmonton, for Carolina, for Washington. I mean, I think this is Husso's net. So go ahead, change your list, type in VILLE HUSSO. My number 4 is also a goaltender. 2, in fact. Both Mikko Koskinen and Michael Smith.
They're on my list as well.
Michael W. Smith over here.
Michael W. Smith.
I don't know if that's his middle name, but if you listen to Christian music in the 90s, you know who I'm talking about. Okay, Mike Smith. Mikko Koskinen. The Oilers, there's no guarantee they're going to make the playoffs still. They are, there's, yes, a few teams would need to jump them, but they need to keep pushing here. And to me, it's their goaltending is going to be what ultimately not only gets them into the playoffs, but if they're going to win rounds, it's got to be one of these 2 guys playing much better than they have all year.
Ooh, yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, look, Mike Smith started out rough. He's been okay as of late, but and same with Koskinen. He's been okay as of late. I mean, minus that shellacking in Calgary. We won't talk about that, but
a lot of people get shellacked in Calgary.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, this team, I mentioned it earlier with St. Louis, but as a defensive, player in Edmonton, right? Your Darnell Nurses, your Tyson Berries, your Duncan Keiths, Cody Ceci, you mentioned it. When these guys are stepping out on the ice, they're constantly thinking about, if I fuck up, my goaltender's screwed. Like, he's not stopping the puck. There's no way we're getting a save out of this. And if that's your mindset the whole entire evening, you're not playing the type of game that Edmonton really wants you to play, right? You're not going to step up. You're not going to pinch in the offensive zone, maybe where you need to, right? You're going to, be a little bit hesitant to make that first pass out of the defensive zone, right? You might be scared that, hey, if I make this pass through the middle of the ice, it's going to get, picked off, and then we're screwed going back the other way because everybody else is rushing down the ice. That's what Edmonton likes to do, right? They play north and south. They go fast, and if
I like
you can't
to go
get out
fast.
If you're not first, you're last, right? I mean, listen, that team ride and dies by that goaltending, especially after this offseason and trade deadline when Ken Holland decided to not address the goaltending issues. I mean, they've been terrible last year. They were terrible last year. We knew it coming in this year, and change had to happen. It didn't happen, and so now as a defensive player, you're scared out of your mind to make a mistake back there, and that just changes the way you play.
Yep, I agree. We could also we really could toss Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid into that because, frankly, last year's playoffs, McDavid with 1 goal and 3 assists and Draisaitl with 2 goals, 3 assists. As
Bravo
crazy as it is to say, they got shut down in comparison to what they would normally do.
Bravo. They figured it out.
They did. I mean, I think we're going to need to see them step up and be even better in the playoffs. And, maybe the one guy who should have been on our list as a key contributor for these playoffs is Evander Kane. What can he do come playoff time? He has only made the playoffs twice in his entire career, and it's been since 18-19 since he was there. He put up 8 points in 20 games for the Sharks, but he's going to need to be good. He's going to need to keep on scoring goals for this team. I mean, he's not, going to be a huge assist guy, but so far he's got 15 goals in like 22 games or something like that. Or,
when you're playing with Conor McDavid, it's hard not to score
16
goals.
16 and 30. Yeah, so I mean, he's on like a 40-goal pace, which really means in a 7-game series, you need him scoring probably 3 or 4 goals, and they're going to need to be 3 or 4 big ones. So Edmonton, a lot of pressure, much like their counterpart in the West, the Leafs. But the Leafs have had more success in the regular season this year to where you're less worried, I guess, even though their opponent's probably going to be scarier. So, let's go number 3.
All right. Number 3 for me is Erik Haula, second-line center to the Boston Bruins. I know you've kind of picked on Boston already once, but I'm going to go back.
Picking on them.
No. Nick Felino. You're picking on Nick Felino, but I'm going to go back and pick on a guy who is expected to be even better than Nick Felino, and that's Erik Haula. I mean, this is a guy that was essentially thrusted into a second-line center role after David Krejci left. Whether or not he's actually the guy that can handle it is a whole nother story. I mean, look, so far this year, you played a majority of your season with Taylor Hall. You've had, now it seems like about halfway through the season, they figured out, was not that good. You figured out halfway through the season that, shoot, if we move Pasta down to the second line and move Jake DeBrusk up, we can have 2 really good lines. And it seemed like Taylor Hall and Pasta were clicking. They were playing phenomenal hockey and still are, but for some reason, Erik Haula just couldn't capitalize on that success, right? I mean, he's been playing fairly good, as far as a two-way game is concerned, but, offensively, the numbers just haven't been there for me. And, and again, for a team that didn't go out and really address their, what seems like has been their most pressing need since David Krejci left, and that was a decent second-line center. And maybe Charlie Coyle was initially thought to be that guy when they brought him in, years back, but he looks better suited for that third line role. And so Erik Haula has to step up and be that guy and just hasn't provided the production. And so what I wonder is, coming down the stretch, I need more out of him, because if Baptiste Bergeron, Brad Marchand, if that top line just sort of fumbles a little bit and you have to rely heavily on Erik Haula to be, the go-to guy with that second line, is he going to deliver? And, especially when you get to play with 2 all-star players like Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak, you've got to step it up. You should be able to produce a lot more than 33 points through 60-some games.
Yeah, but, I mean, outside of one season, this is his best season of his career.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, that first year in Vegas, he was phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's his anomaly season. That's his max Domey 72 points, right? Like, he had a 55-point season, almost 30 goals. That's not actually who he is. And he's going to put up probably 40 points by the end of the year. And for me, I guess that's more than what I would expect out of Erik Haula. However, maybe playing with who he's playing with, he does burden some more of the defensive responsibilities to be able to let those guys go. So there is that. But yeah,
and that's the thing, right? I mean, he on his own, right, when he's not playing with those 2 guys, wouldn't expect that type of production out of him. Because, again, I agree with you. He's never really been that type of offensively output kind of guy. But, again, when you're playing more than half the season with Taylor Hall and David Pasta, you should be doing a little bit better. So, and if this team wants to go deep in the playoffs, I mean, Hampus Lindholm might be the game changer they needed, to make the difference, get them over that hump. But they're going to have to be able to roll 3 good lines, and Halla's going to have to really, I mean, he's going to have to step up just a little bit more for me offensively come playoff time when they, can't rely on that top line anymore.
Yeah, either that or he's just going to have to be incredibly difficult to beat defensively.
Exactly.
Like make up for some of that, which he has been good in the face-off circle. Not as, I mean, I guess he's over 51%, so it's not bad, but it doesn't compare to his like last year was at 55%. Historically, he's been actually a little better in the face-off circle. So perhaps that's an area that he could certainly help them to get the puck in the offensive zone when they have the opportunity. Okay, let's. My number 3 is Jack Eichel and Robin Lehner. We've already beat them to death. So we'll go to my number 2. You said your number 3. That was your number 3, right?
That was my number 3.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't skipping you. My number 2, we talked about him a little bit, but my number 2 is Jack Campbell. I have him up this high because I truly believe, like, everyone might get fired in Toronto if they don't win at least a playoff series this year. And if they win one, the next series they better lose in 7 kind of thing. Like they can't just win a playoff series and then lose in 5 games and call it good. I think they need to go on a deep run. Otherwise, I think there is a chance that they might bring in either a different head coach or a different general manager. I think heads will fly. You got to think that Shanahan's safe for one more GM if he wants to bring in someone else. And then the pressure would be very heavy. This is supposed to be a team that's competing for the Stanley Cup. Based off what Shanahan said years ago and what they wanted to build, now's their time. So they better do it. And Jack Campbell may be the most important player there, not Austin Matthews, not Mitch Marner. It might very well be Jack Campbell. Which is a tremendous amount of pressure to put on to one person who's been with the team for 18 months.
And a guy who's never been a true number 1.
Sure. But I mean, I'd say the way that he's played the last 18 months, barring like a month of that, he is the number 1 goalie. He's the number 1 goalie.
Oh, sure. He's played like it. Absolutely. Yeah. I don't disagree. Now, if you're Toronto, let me ask you this. Come playoff time, if you have to start, because again, I agree with you. I think it's crucial that they win that first round. It looks like right now they're slated to play Tampa in the first round. Would you rather them maybe dip a little bit and fall out and have to start the first round against Carolina or Florida, or would you rather them stay where they are and play against Tampa?
Just keep playing the games.
Okay.
I don't think you can't go, let's lose on purpose. The second you do you're screwed, Or let's rest some guys. I mean, I don't have a problem with resting Spezza and Simmons. I think those guys should be playing every other day anyways. And with sneaky under the radar last second signing here, Nick Abruzzi coming in from Harvard, I think he's got a real shot to be something really special. So I think I don't know if he's going to get have his debut tonight against the Flyers, or if it'll be here in the near future. But I think that type of player is very important for the Leafs because they need to be able to give Simmons, give Spezza some time to just kind of gear up for the playoffs. I think you've seen it. Wayne Simmons, this is probably his last year. My guess is he retires after this year, to be honest. He's played quite bad. He's getting healthy scratched all the time.
He's just slow.
He's slow. Yep.
Yeah.
And unless something really changes, unless he really goes to work, loses weight, and is able to get some of that speed back. I mean, even his hands just don't look as good. Spezza's hands are still there. I think with Spezza, it's just a matter of just give him a little time off and have him, don't have him play every night. In my opinion, that's what I would do. But he might tell you he wants to play every night, and I say, too bad. But yeah, I think Jack Campbell he's the key. He's the key to it all. Who's your number 2?
My number 2 is the guy you mentioned earlier, and I promised we would wait to talk about, and that is Alex Lafreniere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Second most important player coming into the playoffs.
I absolutely think so, because, again, we talked about it to start this list off, how important third lines are going to be to team successes. And listen, the Rangers got lucky, and I shouldn't say get lucky. I think they traded wisely because, to me, this was a guy who I thought was going to be an under-the-radar type of move, just like a Max Domey, but he seems to have paid off even better at this point when they acquired Andrew Kopp, right? Ryan Strom's gone down with injury for the last couple of games, and Kopp has stepped in just phenomenally, but it gives you flexibility, right? Frank Vetrano's another acquisition they made who has turned out extremely well. And now you're able to put him on the right wing where he actually is suited for to score some goals. And it gives you the opportunity to move Alexis down to your third line, right? You can put him on his left wing where he's most comfortable, where he's a natural player at, and you give him that opportunity to really go out there and score some goals. But the reason I put him a little bit higher on this list is just because, I look at his production that he's had through the course of the season. In, 67 games, he's played with phenomenal players, like you mentioned, Chris Kreider, only 25 points and 15 goals to go for it. I need more out of this guy. I think especially if this team's going to be, and granted, all 15 of those goals are even strength goals too, so he sees no power play time at all. I think if this team wants to have long-term success in the playoffs, they need a third line that can contribute, and that's one of the reasons they brought in Gaudreau, right? So he can be that third line guy he was in Tampa, and Philip Seidl is going to be Philip Seidl. He's going to bring you good third line production, and so Lafreniere's got to step it up and be that go-to guy on the third line.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I have him on my list. Part of me feels as though he's so overrated because of where he was taken in the draft, and that really he's probably ends up being no more than a nice second line winger. We'll see how he actually pans out, but at the same time, the playoffs are that time where a young guy, it's a fresh season kind of deal, and some of these young players, they go, oh, I get it, and then they have the playoff of their life, and then the rest of their career kind of takes off from there. So I do, maybe that's Alex Lafreniere. I hope for his sake, I hope that it is. Unless he's playing the Leafs, then I hope that it doesn't happen.
Right, and you look at, again, Capo Caco's been out with injury, and I know there's been talks again with one of these two guys possibly getting moved. It was at the deadline they were thinking about moving one of those guys, and I think if you're going to seize an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, this is why you should keep me, and maybe, especially, again, this is a big what if management's thinking this. If Chris Drury's up there thinking, okay, I need to move one of these guys and bring in another piece, say we don't go far in the playoffs, this is your opportunity to give him a reason to keep you.
Yep, 100%. Okay, on to the number one. Who do you have?
So I've got a tandem, and you've already talked about them, but for me, I don't think there's any other tandem that's going to equate. Yeah, the Edmonton Oilers goaltending is going to be so. Listen, they've just got to be better, right? If Edmonton wants to go deep, especially if you end up in a series where you face another Winnipeg that shuts down McDavid and Draisaitl, right? I mean, Evander Kane was brought in to help kind of alleviate that, so you don't have to pair those two superstars together, and you hope to spread out the offense. But if for some reason offensively they get stymied and they just can't produce, you've got to have good goaltending back there, right? The goaltending's got to bail you out. And right now, I would not look back at that goaltending and say, okay, they're capable of bailing them out.
Right. And what I'll say is that while your number one tandem, you're asking them kind of to do something that either they have never done or, in Mike Smith's case, has not really done in a long time.
Right.
So it's almost like it's like grasping at straws for the Oilers, right? Like, and I think a lot of people recognize that hey, you can tell these guys to step it up all you want, but they're incapable. It's just some people you can try as hard as you want, and Nick Felino is not going to be Connor McDavid, just like the Oilers goaltending is not going to be good. Like, I'm sorry, that's just. I don't see it happen. Now, does it mean that they can't be good for a game? No. They'll have like nice little flashes in the pan, and maybe that's enough to get them through the first round. Beating an LA. Do I think they have what it takes to beat LA? Yeah, probably. Can they beat Calgary in their present situation? No. I mean, Calgary's goaltending, their defense, their depth far exceeds anything the Oilers have. The only thing the Oilers have is McDavid and Draisaitl. Let's face it, that's it. And Evander Kane helps, but everything else has just kind of been what it is. It isn't much different than what we've seen in the past. My number one is a little more like, you've done it before, and we've seen it this season, but we need to see it from a huge, crazy extent. You need to go on your hottest run you've ever had, and that's Connor Hellebuyck. If the Winnipeg Jets are going to make the playoffs, Connor Hellebuyck, who, frankly, I mean, he's playing really well. He's won 4 of his last 5 games, and granted, 2 of those games, 2 of those 5, one of the win, the one loss, he allowed 4 goals, but he got a shutout and allowed 1 and 2 goals in the other ones. He's been playing well the last 5 games, and he's won 7 of 9. So it's not as if 6 of 9. So, or 6 of 8. Oh my gosh, it's there. Connor Hellebuyck has it in him. And if the Winnipeg Jets are to make the playoffs, I mean, there's no other team that has a player like Connor Hellebuyck who you could say, honest to God, that guy could, these last 13 games of the season, they could win 11 of them because of Connor Hellebuyck. It's a stretch, sure, but if they are going to make the playoffs, he is the most important player in the league right now for any team to make the playoffs, especially with where they sit on the outside looking in. They've got 1 game in hand on Vegas, and Dallas has 3 games in hand on them. They're 4 points back. Like, there's the math is against them, but I think if they were to win 10 of their last 13 games, that would put them at 96 points. 96, is that enough to get them in? I don't know. That might, and we might be seeing in the West 100 points is what you need to get into the playoffs.
Ooh.
Or pretty close, maybe 98. But anyways, 10 wins out of their last 13 games would put them at 96 points, which in general has gotten you into the playoffs. Can Connor Hellebuyck help this team go 10-3 in their last 13 games? He'd be the one that has to do it.
Yeah, the one thing I will say for Winnipeg, right, and maybe why I didn't put Connor Hellebuyck or anybody really from Winnipeg on my list, is the fact that I think as a team collectively, everybody needs to play at their best, right? Because they are so far out of the playoffs right now in terms of, remaining games and the points they're behind Dallas and Vegas right now. Sure. They really need everybody to play at their most elite levels that they've had, right? I mean, if there's any time to be in playoff mode, it is right now, right? You want guys stepping up. You want your Scheifele's, your Blake Wheelers. You want those guys playing at a point per game production. And you need Hellebuyck stepping up with like 925 save percentages every single night at least. So
I'm thinking like 9.4, 9.5.
It might be needed, right? Because again, the hole they've dug themselves into early in the season, and lately it looks like these guys have been kind of doing that. They've been stepping up, and where you kind of hope they would have been at the beginning of the year. And look, to me, I don't disagree with you. I think that's a well-chosen number one and a guy that I won't argue with on anybody's list. But
he's your boy.
I still think he's, a quality top 10 goaltender. But I just think, again, as a team and as a whole, I think there's just so many players on this team I could pick. And maybe that's why I had a hard time putting them on my list. But, again, not going to fault you for doing it.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, that's our, top 10 players that need to pick it up. There you go. We will be back soon. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Until then, Justin, have a good rest of your weekend, and to our listeners, enjoy all the hockey. We'll talk to you later.